Dr. Ronan Hoffman is a member of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, and I spoke to him earlier today about the situation in Israel and in Gaza.
Surely, even with the ground invasion, it's impossible to totally get rid of Hamas and to completely destroy its capacity to fire rockets into Israel.
Yes, well, the decision of the Israeli cabinet is not to get rid of Hamas. It's first of all to restore quiet and peace to the citizens of Israel, and then to minimize the capabilities of Hamas to rocket fires in the future. And in order to do that, you have to get some kind of ground operation.
Mm-hmm. Now, for the longest time, obviously, rockets have been coming in. This has been a long-term preparation campaign. I assume when Egypt was going through its revolution, weapons were coming across the border. That's now been sealed by the Egyptian government. Iran wants to make the situation worse. How does Iran get missiles into Gaza, though?
Well, you know, the missiles were smuggled through tunnels, through boats from the sea, and this is exactly what we need to make sure it's going to stop. And in order to do it, we have to go for a military operation, and then once we reach ceasefire, we'll have to cooperate with other moderate forces in the region to isolate Hamas and to make sure that they are not going to go for another round.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is extremely significant because there are moderate forces. This is not just, these aren't empty words. Egypt quite clearly wants Hamas to stop. Now it wants it to be defeated. Other countries in the Arab region have very little sympathy for Hamas. But to get rid of all of those rockets and missiles, surely at some point you will have to go into the urban centers, and that's going to be costly.
Yes, but there are things that we need to do in order to get our citizens free of being under fire of rockets. You know, some of it has to be done by military forces, some of it has to be done by political pressure on Hamas in the future.
Yeah. You can have dialogue even with enemies. There's a certain common ground, but surely there is no common ground with Hamas. They only have a ceasefire. For them, will only be how long can they not be attacked so they can try and rearm.
Unfortunately, there's no common ground for political negotiations with Hamas. Hamas, you know, they're very radical. They're very similar to Al-Qaeda and to other radical jihadi movements. Maybe in the future they will be willing to accept some conditions of the quartet and, you know, get rid of terrorism and all that. I doubt it.
Mm. How long do you think you'll have to stay in Gaza? You've learned before in Israel that long-term stays in other countries and regions doesn't usually pay off. You were in Gaza, you left. Is this going to be a week, a couple of weeks, or a long-term invasion of a region that is extremely hostile to you?
Well, I don't know. I don't know how long we'll be there. Of course, we are not happy to be there, so I'm sure that our government will do everything it can in order not to be there for a long time.
Mm-hmm. The Israeli people argue. I mean, they're notorious for this. Speaking to people in Israel, I've really seen such unity, left and right. A tiny fringe might disagree, but for the most part, whatever people's politics, they seem to support what is going on.
Yes, yes, and I can understand why. More than 5.5 million of Israelis were under fire of rockets, and you know, no country can sit idly by while its you know, civilian population is subjected to terrorist rocket fire, and Israel is no exception. Yeah. So of course the citizens support the government in order to stop it and to come back to normal kind of life.
Yeah. Last question. Even if Gaza is quiet again, there has to be something beyond that. There has to be a long-term solution.
I totally agree with you, and I think the long-term solution has to do with cooperating with other forces in the region.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
There can be no military solution to this conflict. This applies as much to Israel, Palestine, as it does to Syria.
I reaffirmed my strong support for Israel's right to defend itself. No nation should accept rockets being fired into its borders or terrorists tunneling into its territory. In fact, while I was having the conversation with Prime Minister Netanyahu, sirens went off in Tel Aviv.
Israeli soldiers have entered Gaza, but the rockets continue to be fired into the Jewish state. Will this latest operation succeed? Intelligence analyst and Middle East expert Jonathan Harlevy joins us. It'll take some time, and some of those rockets surely will never be found. I mean, there is no way. This is people talk about how small Gaza is. It's not that small, and a lot of people there, dense, difficult. They will always be able to hide some. I would pretty much guarantee as soon as Israeli forces leave, and they have to at some point, rockets will fire again. Maybe not many, but some will.
Yes, I think this is a logic, a reasonable scenario. That's the problem when you deal with terrorist organizations that vows to destroy the state of Israel. You have to fight for your life, and you don't have any other choice.
In terms of long-term peace, and I've said this to people from both sides, I don't envisage a time when Jews and Arabs are hugging each other and parting and saying, we just have so much love here. I mean, let's be realistic here. I'm talking about a mutual coexistence where you might even hate the sight of each other, but you don't try and kill each other. Now, I think something could be resolved possibly in the West Bank. It's not going to be easy, but if Gaza is going to be hit, if Hamas is going to be destabilized, surely you have to give something as well to Fatah and the leadership on the other side.
The problem is that you cannot reach any agreement with the West Bank because of the power of veto that Hamas has in Gaza. Yeah. That's the problem. So Israel is stuck. It's a catch-22. So you have to eradicate Hamas in order to find a new partner in the Palestinian camp that can deliver. Right now, no one can deliver any agreement whatsoever.
Going on what's going on now, look, this thing here, I look at Twitter and the malice and the ignorance is quite incredible. It's dribbled over into anti-Semitism. Now, there are many, many harsh critics of Israel who are not anti-Semitic. They're just not. But it has dribbled into that. You see people who just scream they hate Jews. The Malaysian airliner that was brought down, there were all sorts of tweets. It was the Mossad that did it. The hashtag Hitler was right is huge in places like Pakistan and so on. But in terms of trying to achieve peace on the ground, there are so many people now who are convinced that the Jews went to Israel to build an empire. They never lived there in the first place. They had no reason to go. I mean, all of this total garbage is completely ahistorical. What do you do, though, now? How do you achieve anything resembling a peace? I have no idea how I can see how you'll have peace with Egypt, and with the Gulf states, maybe even with Syria long term, but not with the Palestinian people. Look
at the language terminology used by the Palestinians, Fatah and Hamas alike. They focus on justice. They want justice, the Palestinian justice, of course. For the Israeli side, they talk about compromise. Reach a compromise with the Palestinians. You know, two-state solutions. I give up, you give up, and we coexist. But from the Palestinian side, there is no one who said, okay, we won't compromise. No, we want justice. Look at the demonstration. Look what Mahmoud Abbas is saying, what Ismail Haniyeh is saying. So you cannot reach an agreement between compromise and justice.
What do you do then?
So it's a situation that you have to manage in order to survive. If you give up, let's say that the state of Israel is game over. Is the problem is over? Is the West is safer? No, the next game will be in Europe. So Israel is the last barrier from that holds back the radical Islamism from attacking Europe and the rest.
Just before we go, you mentioned a threat to down a Canadian airliner?
Hamas, since the beginning of the missile attacks at Israel, targeted the major international airport in Israel, Ben Gurion Airport. So, and even today, by the way, he targeted the airport, and he threatens all other airliners to be aware of its attack, which means that also the Canadian airliners, like Air Canada, is being threatened by Hamas. Look what happened with the Malaysian airplane. The same tactics is used by Hamas. Hamas has no boundaries anymore. It's like ISIS. It's like Al-Qaeda.
It does seem ridiculous to me because I've flown to Israel many times, and the flights are often, there are many, many people who are quite clearly Muslim. I mean, the women who have full Islamic dress. I mean, they'd be killing so many of their own. However, I wish I could end this on an optimistic note, but I'm not actually very optimistic. But thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.